David.
Hello, mates. All right.
Thanks so much for coming on Perform. We really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, I've done a lot of obviously research into yourself and your history. Right now with what you're claiming with, everything with the tidal waves, the earthquakes, the big question is how can people get prepared if you are correct?
You've gone a long, long way back.
Yeah.
To a time that it would take a lot of explaining, a lot of background. And you need to pick it up from the best part of the last 30 years when I've been talking about this global cult that is manipulating human society into a global fascist Orwellian state. And it's been doing it stage by stage over a long period of time. And what we're seeing now in current events is the culmination of that. So that's the kind of the area that I've most focused on.
And for people out there, obviously, you're saying, people should have love in their heart. And, what things can people do to protect themselves from this sort of cult outside of having love?
Well, I think that's the foundation of it. But I mean, we've got to look at, what love is, because we've lost touch with that. I mean, so many people will associate love with attraction, which can be part of it. But it's a very low level of the true magnitude of what we call love. In fact, we've lost so much touch with the idea and the meaning that we have to put words like unconditional in front of it. And, I find that, friendship is far closer, often, not always, to that concept of unconditional love than regular relationships. Because if a relationship is based on purely attraction, well, when the attraction dies, then so does the relationship, so does the connection. Now, you can have relationships that are based on not just attraction, but love in its true sense, and that can go on indefinitely. But if you are looking at friendship, what do they say about friendship? That great line, a friend is someone who walks into the room when everyone else is walking out. That's unconditional love. I may not agree with what you've done, but I'm here for you. And that's the kind of the level of love that we call unconditional. And so what is that? I say that's the true self. That's the real self, which resides here during what we call a human lifetime, a human experience. Because one of the greatest ways, the fundamental way that this global cult controls and manipulates the perceptions and the behavior of humanity is by persuading us that there is no out there. There is no expanded consciousness. What we are, the I, is simply our labels, the labels we give ourselves and the labels we're given. I am ours, I call them, or phantom self. I am a man. I am this religion. I am this race. I am this sexuality. Now, that's what you're experiencing in a very brief experience called human. What you are eternally is that which is experiencing that brief experience. You're not actually the experience in the sense of the true I. So if you say to people, hello, nice to meet you. Who are you? And they will tell you their name. They'll tell you, if it goes on for long enough, they'll tell you their life story. They'll tell you their religion, possibly, their race and cultural background, their job. But they're all experiences. And what this cult has done has persuaded so much of humanity to self-identify with the experience, the phantom self, and forget that what we are is potentially limitless consciousness having that experience. Because once you self-identify with the labels, you are moving into five-sense reality. You're moving out of expanded reality into five-sense reality. And if you look at this, this phenomenon, which has not happened by accident at all, called identity politics, it is subdividing the previous labels into smaller and smaller self-identities. And it's taking us more away from the true I, the true self, which is consciousness, ultimately an expression of all consciousness, which is what we all are. This is why racism and the divisions on the grounds of what? On the grounds of labels. I mean, we're having now in Israel this outbreak again of conflict. And what is that a conflict between? A conflict between labels, between self-identities. And so if we can get to that point where we realize that all these self-identities, all these labels are merely brief experiences in a human life, and that we are all, whatever we call ourselves and whatever we may identify with, we are all expressions of one consciousness. We're all each other. We're all unique points of attention within an infinite state of consciousness. And that is that connection to that greater self comes from here, comes from the heart vortex. This is where the true self lives. And what we have and how this has come about, we have two worlds within one world. We have the world of the general population, and we have the world of this global cult, which is a global network of secret societies with a central leadership, ultimately. And the difference between the two is simple: knowledge. The idea is to keep the public in ignorance, both of what this cult is doing in terms of where it's taking humanity, although it's becoming more and more obvious by the day, but crucially, to keep from the population the knowledge of the true I and the very nature of the reality that we're experiencing. They don't call them secret societies for a bit of fun. It's because they carry secrets. And those secrets are what they don't want the public to know. I mean, we're seeing an expression of this big time in the hysterical levels of censorship now. What is that except keeping from the people what this small group doesn't want the people to know? And so we are in a situation where we are encouraged, manipulated to self-identify with little me. I've got no power. And not to self-identify with the true I, which is infinite power, if only we would realize it. And so you have this division between those who have access to advanced knowledge, and that's what's passed over at the inner core of the secret societies through the generations. And you have the public in systematic ignorance of what they not only know, but what they're doing. And once you access this, not least from working your backside off for 30 years, and you uncover what this projected agenda is, then two things happen. One, you can predict the future. I mean, my books have been so accurate in predicting the future, not because I'm some, guru bleeding genius, but because if nothing intervenes to stop the agenda of this cult, then it will happen. It will become the future. It is becoming the present now. And the second thing that happens, and I have had this over decades, it's changing now, mind, that when you take this information and you say to the general population, this is what's planned and this is what's going on, great chunks of them say, you're mad, you're crazy. That can't be, because one of the greatest ways of controlling people is to suppress their sense of the possible. You want to hold them in a very narrow band of perceived possibility, which means you can manipulate them by technology and techniques outside that perception of possibility, and they'll never understand or realize how they're being manipulated. But of course, because of the last year and a bit more than a year now, a different world has been put into people's faces, and so many people now are seeing through it and realizing that the world they thought they were living in and the powers that were running it are not actually what they thought they were.
Could you give our viewers an insight on how they could become more conscious? Maybe like a quick few tips for people out there who are watching this, because, you know, when I listen to you, tons of great knowledge is coming at me. But if I want to be more conscious and I want to be more aware, I'd love to hear from you.
I tell you what, it's dead simple. Okay, awakening. We hear this all the time. People are awakening. What are they awakening from? They're awakening from the program. They're awakening from the perceptual program. If you look at a human life, from cradle to grave, it is a download of perception from the authorities. You come out of the womb and your parents, who've been through what you're about to go through, have been obviously influenced by that perceptual download, and then they pass it on to you, not because they're malevolent, but they think that's what they need to do because that's what they've been told. You then hit school at 3, 4 now, and you've only just arrived in the world, and there's an authority figure called a teacher who is giving you the version of reality that the state says that they have to give you. And more than that, you've only just arrived in the world and you're already being prepared to obey authority by reflex action. So you arrive in the classroom, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, and immediately an authority figure is telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can talk, when you can eat, when you can go to the toilet. And this goes on all the way through your formative years while you're downloading the state's version of reality across the whole spectrum of knowledge. You then go out into the world of work, and there you meet people who have been through the process you've just been through, the download of what I call the postage stamp consensus, this narrow band of perceived possibility. Only they've been through it earlier than you. But when you go into the world of work, you are overwhelmingly surrounded by people who bought the same sense of reality, the same sense of normal, the same sense of the real world that you've been downloading. So you have this agreement. Everybody, this is the great line you hear all the time. Oh, everyone knows that, mate. Well, I don't know it. So we've made a start. But everyone's confirming to everyone else that what they think is how it is. And so when you do that, you're kind of left alone, you know, and you might pass your exams and you confirm your degree of programming. But anyone that wants to stand or walk off the postage stamp and start to explore other possibilities beyond the narrow band of this is how it is, they get the stick, not the carrot. They get the ridicule. They get the call to their parents. Oh, Johnny's a disruptive influence in the classroom. What's he doing? He's always asking questions. They'll all want to do it. And so the pressure is more than anyone else. So any time now, I feel so sorry for the kids today because of the monumental programming that's going on. And so the pressure is to conform. And there's people running around symbolically like those games in amusement arcades where the heads come up and you've got a hammer and you're trying to, anyone that comes up and says, I want to be different. Oh, gotcha, come on, shut up, get down. And more than ever today, look at it, the cancel culture. Don't have an opinion that's not okay and approved. Otherwise, we're going to shut you up. We're going to silence you. So the pressure to conform is absolutely colossal. And then as you go through your life, you've got the mainstream media pounding you and telling you what you perceive to be normal from the download is actually how things are. And then you go out the other end in a cemetery or something, and that's and others are coming in the other end for the same process to take place. So that's the program, and that's why people en masse are so easy to control. That's why people are in a perceptual coma that can't see beyond the end of the thing on the front of their face. And that whole perceptual state is like a tiny bubble. It's overwhelming. You look at it. It's overwhelmingly about filtering reality through only the five senses. And the whole foundation of human control, if you go deeper into the esoteric, is to isolate what I will call five sense mind from the greater consciousness, and then program that five sense mind with a sense of reality that will make you easy to control en masse. So awakening is awakening from that program and starting to see the world in a much more expansive way. Now, over the years, I've seen the gurus, I've seen the quests, and I've seen all these things that you need to go through, and fasting. And I'm not knocking it, whatever turns you on, whatever works for you. But I see all these things you have to go through to awaken. So I don't think you do, you see. I think it's much simpler than that. To awaken is to redefine self-identity from I am my labels. And all those labels will have limitation written all over them because they all come from that level. Limited. I can't. It's not possible. And just redefine self-identity. That I am not the experience. I am that which is having the experience. So I'm not Bill driving the bus. I'm not Mary on the checkout or Ethel on the at the call center. That is simply an experience I am having. I am the consciousness, potentially all consciousness that is having that experience. And I can only talk from my own experience, and that is that as you expand your sense of self, your self-identity, from little me to infinite me having an experience. As you expand your self-identity, so you expand your awareness to express that self-identity into greater and greater levels of consciousness. And you move outside the bubbles, indeed the bubbles burst. And suddenly you are perceiving the world as you perceive yourself from an expanded state of awareness. And then suddenly things start to change. First of all, you stop seeing dots that are unconnected and you start to see patterns and you start to see pictures, because you've gone from there and you've gone from there to there on so many levels. And now you can see the world as it is. You can see the forces at work that you couldn't see before, when everything seemed random and everything seemed apart from everything else and unconnected. But suddenly, now you can see the pictures and now you can see the patterns. And something else happens. If you talk, and this happened to me big time, but you talk to anyone that's gone through this awakening process, awakening from the program, because this is the point to emphasize. This state of expanded awareness, this is our natural state. This is how we are meant to be. This is who we are. We've been manipulated into an unnatural state of seriously focused attention, which is what five sense reality is. So when you talk to people who've been through this awakening process, what you hear again, my God, it happened to me, like I say, is your life becomes incredibly synchronistic. things happen at just the right time. Your life becomes full of, what's the chances of that? Fancy seeing you here and all that. So why is this happening? Why wasn't it happening before? Because we are an expression, a point of attention within an infinite flow of awareness. And the question is, how much of that awareness, which is what? Potential. When we talk about something being all that is, has been, and ever can be, the five sense mind says you can't be all that is, has been, and ever can be, because you've got past, present, and future and all that stuff. But actually, what is all that is, has been, and ever can be? It's simply all potential, all possibility. And what the cult wants to do is focus our attention in a narrow band of perceived possibility that cuts us off from all possibility. So when you're in that state, you are actually, because of your self-identity, because of your little me perception, you are accessing only a tiny part of this all possibility field. And therefore, your life becomes a reflection of that limited possibility. Your sense of possibility becomes your experience possibility. But when you start to redefine your state of awareness to I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience, that expansion takes you into greater and greater swathes of all possibility. And so things can manifest in your life that weren't manifesting before, because you are interacting with a far greater range of all possibility, which you can make manifest. And if you think about that, how easy is it for a few to control people in that state? It's impossible. So they have to have us in this limited state, this limited sense of perception and possibility, so that they can control us en masse. And so for me, it's a simple process of redefining self-identity. And from that, all else will come. And it certainly did in my life anyway, because the synchronicity of my life has just been extraordinary. I mean, I couldn't have put together all these books, some of them massive, it just sitting here trying to work it out. It's because people, information, personal experience, documents, books have all come into my life in a synchronistic way. And that's what happens when you self-identify with being in an expanded state of consciousness instead of identifying with being Bill driving the bus. And everything changes when you go through that process, I find anyway.
You know, the millennial nowadays, they want everything short, right? They want it fast. They want 30 seconds, 60 seconds. If you were to speak to the millennial right now, they want to know in 60 seconds, they say to you, David, in 60 seconds, if you were to help me get to a better state of consciousness, what advice could you give me, the millennial, in 60 seconds? What could you tell them?
Stop asking for it all in 60 seconds. Because you see, this is what the programming has been about on one level. It's about limiting the level of and the period of concentration. If you can get people to demand, give it me in 60 seconds, or I'm not interested and I'm bored now. You've gone past 60. You're 62 seconds, mate. I'm bored. Well, you're not going to learn anything. And that's the idea. They want people to flit, to get bored quickly and then flit and not get into substance, because substance will lead to a greater sense of reality, enlightenment, whatever you call it. They want the flitting mind. So get out of the flitting mind and start working to expand and extend your period of concentration. But, you know, in simple terms, change who you think you are, and you'll change what you experience. Because what we think we are manifesting all the time. And you know, we're doing it anyway because our perceptions become our experience. But we can take control of that process and decide our own perception, which dictates our own experience, as opposed to what's happening, and has happened all the way through known human history, really, that some external force has programmed our perception, which has then become our experience. So we're having our perceptions downloaded, which then become our experience through interaction with this field of possibility. So if you think you are a little me, then you'll live a little me life, not because you are, but because you believe you are. I'm just little me. I've got no power. What can I do? Okay, I tell you what you can do. You can experience that perception. And you know what's going to happen? That perception is going to generate an experience which is going to underpin your perception that you're little me and have no power. Because that feedback loop between your perception of self and the field of all possibility is going to keep manifesting that possibility. Nothing ever happens to me, you know, it's nothing I can do. I just have to follow and do as I'm told. Well, I bloody don't. And once you have a different self-identity, that I am an expression, a unique expression, which we should be celebrating. I am a unique expression that all that is, has been, and ever can be. That expansive sense of self manifests a life that is expansive, that is an adventure. And all the things that anyone can do and anyone can be, but you can't if you perceive that they're not possible, and you can't do them, and you have no power. This is one of the great things. Collectively, you hear this, because the collective. What is the collective? The collective is a collective manifestation of individual human behavior. That's what it is. Human perception becomes human behavior. Collectively, it becomes what we call human society. And so if you want to change human society, you change human perception, which changes human behavior. And any individual can change their perception and thus change their behavior. So if you are perceiving, for instance, that you are little me, that's your perception, and I have no power. And then collectively, lots and lots and lots of people believe that. That gives the power of a very, very few people. It is ridiculously few, I can tell you, to control billions. And we talk about the feedback loop and the confirmation of perception becoming confirmed through the feedback loop. People think authority has power. It has no power. It has no power. Its perceived power is the power that we individually and collectively give to it. And then it takes that power, which manifests as acquiescence, and it recycles it back against us. And we perceive that recycled phase as authority having power. What people miss is that power is the power we've given away through acquiescence to authority. Because if you just break it down to the maths, a handful of people can't control billions unless the billions acquiesce to the few. It can't happen. You know, if they come out of Downing Street or they come out of the White House or wherever, and they say, we've had a discussion and this is what's going to happen, if enough people say, we're not doing it, we're not doing that. Well, where's their power? They've got no power. Their power is in our acquiescence. And that is how we got into this mess. You look all the way through human history, known human history, and you'll see it is a story of the mass of the people in any culture giving their power to a tiny few, which then dictate and dominate their lives. It's the whole story right up to present day is that dynamic. And we have the opportunity now, hallelujah at last, to see that dynamic, to see how that gets us into a situation of perpetual control by the few of the many, and break it, and break that acquiescence. Because, I know that, I've been putting this stuff out now for over 30 years, and I know the patterns of response. That's not possible if you can't control that many people. Oh, really? Oh, they can. And I'll explain why. It's ever so simple. You've got a tiny few people at the top of this global hierarchy, and each individual country has its own hierarchy as well, which connect into the global hierarchy. It's how the cult works. It's how they pulled off the whole COVID thing. You control the World Health Organization. All the countries who are members of the World Health Organization basically do what the World Health Organization says they should do. And you have a tiny few people at the center, total crooks, by the way, dictating the reaction policy to quote COVID for well over a year. That's how simple it is. Now, what if those countries had not acquiesced to the World Health Organization and said, actually, we're going to have a look at this ourselves, actually. Well, thanks for the advice, but, I'll see you later. We are going to decide ourselves how we're going to respond to this. Then we would not have had this situation that we're in. We would have had many, many different responses to it. Individual, unique. The fact that we haven't shows how controlled it is. So this is how it works. You've got a tiny few people at the top of the pyramid, the inner core of the cult, and they're not people on public display. I mean, they're not your Gateses and your Faucis and etc. They're lower down the pyramid, substantially lower. The inner core you never see. So this inner core says to the level below it, this is what you're going to do. This is the agenda. This is what we want to happen. And that next level acquiesces to that inner core and imposes it on the next level. Now, very soon after you come down from that pyramid peak, you're meeting levels of the hierarchy. You have no idea there even is a cult. There is any secret organization and manipulation. They're just being told by their superiors what they have to do, and they acquiesce without question and do it. And this imposition acquiescence comes all the way down the pyramid until you meet the mass of the people. And at that point, if we, and most people do, if we acquiesce to that level of the hierarchy, governments, government agencies, law enforcement, we acquiesce to that imposition on us. We complete a circuit, like an electrical circuit, between the mass of the people and the tiny few at the top, in which these tiny few are dictating the lives of billions of people. And it's only possible because of this imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. So we've got to stop acquiescing with our own enslavement. We've got to stop acquiescing to our own programming and start to free ourselves into remembering, because we've been manipulated to forget, remembering the nature of who we are. And when that happens, this whole house of cards will come down because it's based on human ignorance and human acquiescence. And when these two are gone, the few can no longer control the many, and this world will be a very different place.
If you were to give yourself a piece of advice when you were 30 years old to where you are now, what piece of advice would you give your 30-year-old self?
Remember, everything that happens to you is just an experience, and there'll be another one along in a minute. And not to get so focused mentally or emotionally on a single experience, but realize that life is a very simple process. And this is life beyond this tiny band of frequency we call the human world. And it's so simple. It's choice and consequence. That's how it is. we make choices, and those choices lead to consequences. If we like those consequences, we keep making the same choices. If we don't like the consequences, then maybe we'll be intelligent and wise enough to make different choices, which will lead to different consequences. And that's the whole basis of life: choice and consequence, choice and consequence, choice and consequence. So whatever situation you're in, if you make different choices, create, manifest different consequences. So nothing has to be forever. Nothing is forever. I mean, we live in a realm of all possibility. There's no such thing as something happens forever. Your perceptions will eventually change, and your forever will change. But we've had so many examples of this belief that one experience is everything, with the number of people that have committed suicide in the COVID era. A lot of young people, where they have perceived there's no point in life, there's no reason to go on, that everything's fallen apart, and so I just don't want to be here. But no matter how it looks, it's just another experience. It's not a nice one. We'd rather the world not be like it is. But it's still an experience, and another experience will follow, and another one after that. Nothing is written in stone. Nothing is in concrete. Just because of the way it looks now doesn't mean it's always going to look like that. And, I was a footballer, a soccer player, and then I became a national spokesman for the Green Party. I became a journalist. I worked for the BBC. And then, the top of my head blew off in 1990. I was launched into a totally different sense of reality. For about 3 months, if you asked me my name, I would have had to check. I just went through this explosion of consciousness in a very short period of time. And because I was well known in Britain, when I started talking about this and talking about the things that that were coming to me and the experiences I was having, it got massive publicity, and all of it was absolutely negative beyond belief. It was merciless ridicule and abuse that went on for years, and set me free. Set me free of the fear of what other people think. So I open my mouth now, and what I say is what I believe. And if people don't like it, well, that's fine. That's their right. But I have the right to say it. So it set me free. And I have this phrase I use, that life tends to give us often our greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as our worst nightmares. My worst nightmare, which was literally not being able to walk down the street without being laughed at by people going past, and I'm not kidding, it was at that level, set me free of in any way caring what other people thought of me. Now, if you'd have said to people that at that time, that this bloke is going to be known all over the world, and he's going to be, in interviews like this and what have you all over the world, and people are actually, are going to look at this guy's work and think, well, I think there's some validity in that. People would have called you bloody mad, because, it seemed a completely lost cause. This man's life is over. Never going to recover from this level of ridicule. No. And the mainstream media basically went haywire on me, and then just walked down the street, symbolically leaving me in the gutter, thinking, another one we've destroyed. And now they won't quote me anymore, because those that run their organizations don't want to give me any publicity at all because they're terrified of people hearing what I've got to say. And those two periods are apparently irreconcilable. How can you go from this to this? Because you can go from that to whatever. Nothing is in stone. Where you are is where you are. It doesn't have to be where you stay, no matter how bad it looks. I remember my father saying to me when I was a kid, he said, you know, you're never finished in life, Dave, until you say to yourself you're finished. I remember what he said. He said, when you sit down in a chair and you say, I'm finished, then you're finished. And what he was saying was, what you believe, you know, one of the phrases I use, what you believe you perceive, and what you perceive you experience. But you don't have to. You can transform your life, no matter how bad it looks, by transforming your sense of self and your perceptions, which will then manifest as a different experience. And when people, and I've met them all the time, they say, oh, my life's just the same situation keeps coming up in my life and coming up in my life and coming up in my life. And I say, well, have you changed your perception of life in this period where the same thing keeps recurring? Oh, no. Well, of course not. That's why it keeps recurring. What you believe, you perceive. What you perceive, you experience. So change what you believe and what you perceive, not least about yourself, never mind the world, and your experience will change. It won't change when there's an R in the month. And every now and again, like, 2 out of 6, it will change every time because your experience is an expression of your perception. So your perception changes, your experience has to change. And this is the power that we have to control our own lives and collectively control the experience that we have, that we call human society. It's the fact we've given it away that means and has allowed a tiny few people, it is ludicrously small at its core, to dictate the lives of billions of people. So, obviously I've been on a journey, and that we call it a journey. I've been on a sequence of experiences, and there was a time for this experience and a time for that experience, a time to every purpose under heaven, as they say. But if I'd have known that, what I've just said, when I was, 10, 12, 14, 15, a lot of things that happened to me wouldn't have happened. And a lot of negative things in terms of my own sense of self would not have manifested. But once the penny dropped, hey, don't go blaming anyone else. Your life is a manifestation of you. And this cult wants us to blame everyone else. I'm in this position because of you. And that woman in 1963, that's why this has happened. They're responsible for what's happening to me. But what's that doing? It's saying, here's my power to dictate my own life. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to that woman in 1963, and I'm going to say she has the power to put me in this situation I'm in, and I'm going to give it to this bloke because he's impacted on why I'm in this situation. And it's another exercise in giving your power away. And this is why so many people have this aversion to taking responsibility. Because they want it to be someone else's fault, so they're not responsible. But in doing that, they're giving the power away to change their life. Because it's when we take responsibility, what is that saying? She's not in control of my life. That lady in 1963, he's not in control of my life. She's not in control of my life. I'm in control of my life. So what's happening to me now, which I don't like, is my responsibility. What is it about me that's manifested this experience? What can I change about me that will manifest a different experience. And it's about, that's what happens. Taking responsibility for your life is taking your power back over your life. And that's what the manipulators want us to blame everyone else for the problem. And, you know, politicians, I mean, pathetic. I mean, the level of politician we have now is just extraordinarily bad. And, you know, it is pathetic. But if people just go on externalizing what's going on in the world by saying it's the politicians, they're useless, it's Trump, it's Biden, whatever, what are we doing? Giving our power away to other people and saying it's their fault. The fact that we have useless politicians, overwhelmingly, there are one or two exceptions, is because we've stood for it. You know, why is anyone voting in rigged elections? Why is anyone voting when we have a one-party state that just have different faces, but actually the same things happen whoever's in power? If you go on, playing the game will play you. And it's time, surely, that we stopped letting life live us, which is what people do. When we take on externally downloaded perceptions and then take the consequences of those perceptions in the feedback loop, life is living us. And we perceive ourselves at the mercy of life, at the mercy of circumstance. But when you take control of your own perception and you create experience coming from your perception and not some external download, then you start living life instead of life living you, because now you're impacting upon life and not just reacting to it. I mean, what do most people do? They react to life. Something happens, they react. Something happens, they react. We need to move, surely, into an understanding of our true power. So we don't react to events. We make events happen in our life. And it's possible to do that. And the reason people don't is because the whole system is set up to delete that understanding from people. These great concepts that we've been discussing here, where do they ever appear in a school curriculum? Where do you ever see them in the media, the mainstream media? They don't want people to know this. They want people to think they're victims, and they want people to think that they are just pawns of life, and they have no power. And in that way, the few control the many.
So I wanted to talk to you briefly about your speaking and your book career, because what you've done is remarkable. And for myself, who started a book, and for the people out there, I also speak, and for the people out there who are trying to get their voice or their book out there, what advice could you give someone like myself or somebody who's trying to really make an impact? But, you know, obviously it's very, very difficult this day and age to get your book sold, get it into stores. So maybe you could give us a little bit of history as well on how it started to sort of speed up for you, because I'm going to assume that there was, you know, some hard work to get the book, you know, in the initial stages going. So if you could give us some insight on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, when I started writing books on these subjects, the first one I wrote was called Truth Vibrations in 1990. Which was, I was talking about the strange things that were happening to me, which they were at that time. Amazing things, but strange from a five-sense mind point of view. They were published by publishers, you know, like regular publishers. And then in 1994, I wrote a book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And I think the publisher's still running. Certainly the horizon was a cloud of dust after he read the manuscript. and they wouldn't publish it. And they wouldn't publish it because the names that were in it and the things that it said. So again, we go back to this thing, life gives you your greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmares. So I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? Am I going to, get the books published? And so what we had to do in the end was start to publish our own. And, it's a challenge to start with, because you've got to get into into all the distribution and all that side of it. But it's a fantastic gift for an author, because, media lawyers, if the word no did not exist in the English language, media lawyers would be permanently speechless. Of course, they're watching the backs. Okay, what about that? Oh, I wouldn't put that in. Oh, no, I wouldn't put that in. But so having started my own publishing kind of operation, to publish my own books, which has got more and more sophisticated and efficient as the years have gone on, I write the books, and then they are edited. And they are edited by me. I've been long experienced in journalism, all that stuff, and journalistic law and all that stuff. So I don't need a lawyer looking over my shoulder saying you can't say that. So it's just an incredible freedom, and writing a book, and then getting someone to put it in book form, like a book designer, and getting it printed is pretty straightforward, frankly. But it's distributing it that is the challenge, and that takes time to build up the contacts that will do that. But you can get hold of book distributors, and they will take the book and they will distribute it to the shops. They'll persuade shops to take it and stuff like that. So it's something that builds up over the years, but it's quite simple, really. You write the book, someone designs it and puts it in a book form. Then you get it printed, and people are falling over you to take your work, your money to print it. And then you get these different book distributors and major bookstores sometimes, and they distribute it. So, but it just takes time to build up these contacts, like I say. In terms of writing the book, I've a simple style, which is one, talk to the reader. Don't talk at the reader, talk to the reader, almost talk with the reader. And I get this, I could never write. People say, oh, no, I'm not a writer. Do you have conversations with people? Oh, yeah. Well, I've noticed you can't shut you up. So speak to the page. Speak to the paper. Have someone in your mind that you're having a conversation with, and tell them what you think. Tell them what you know, because a book is simply a conduit for two people to have a conversation or at least exchange information. And then the other thing that one of my kind of absolute golden rules is never introduce something new, like new information, unless you immediately explain its relevance, or its relevance is obvious from what has gone before. Because the worst thing you can do with a reader is lose them, where they're saying, sorry, I don't get that, I don't understand that. Because then you've lost the concentration, you've lost the connection. So just if you are saying, okay, well, here's some information. The key to understanding is context. Here's some information. Okay, so why is this relevant? What's the context of this information? And to explain that immediately, or like I say, what you've already written makes it obvious, the context and the relevance of it. And if you do that, those simple things, you can communicate with people. Writing. Oh, I'm a writer. No, it's a conversation. It's the exchange of information. And if you can have a chat with someone, you can write.
You've written now 20 books. Obviously, some of them have been more successful than others. Outside of the content,
it's actually more than that now. I'm running out of wall.
Okay. Well, outside of the content, because I think that a lot of people out there have books that are printed, but they're trying to, and they're getting them in the stores, but they're not selling them. So has there been a piece of advice in the 20 books that you've had where your publisher has said, hey, David, great job in the marketing. I appreciate you doing this, this, and this. Can you give people out there who already have a book, but it's just, for whatever reason, it's not getting out there, it's not getting the sales? What advice could you give them based on all the books you've written and what you've heard and how you've seen certain books sort of take off marketing wise?
Well, to be honest, we don't really market the books because there's a lot of interest in my books now, and has been for quite a number of years. It means that the distributors and the shops want them because they sell them. People look at the cover price of a book and they say, that price for every book. And that book doesn't come to us. That price doesn't come to us. Obviously, the shipping goes off that. The distributors' percentage goes off that. The bookshops goes off that, and quite right too, because they're part of the process. But if the books are selling, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the books are selling through the shops want the next one. So you don't really have to market it. And we have the website, and I'm doing interviews all the time, so we kind of do it through that means. But it is difficult if you can't get the publicity for the book. Then it is difficult, and that's why I wrote a book a long time ago for a major publisher, and when it came out, blimey! I mean, there's this long list of mainstream. This is back in the 90s now, well into the 90s. The list of media appearances, mainstream media appearances, which this major publisher had set up, was amazing. And I've never experienced that, obviously, since. But that's what these major publishers have. That's the advantage they have. And if you publish yourself, obviously you don't have that advantage. But if the book is if the book is different, and the book has something to say that's different, and it can, I've seen this pass by word of mouth and gather a momentum that way. It is difficult when you publish yourself, say as a one-off, to get it circulated. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I want you to share something with us with this fun wall behind you. Let's see the softer side. What can you share that you haven't shared that's behind you with all these things behind you? What can you tell us about something that's behind you, like that painting above you there?
Well, I've never been asked that before. But anyway, I shall enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get. Oh, there you go.
Something up.
I don't know where I am.
Let's see that one. Let's see it, Brittany.
These are amazing cards that I've had at different times, which like particular days and stuff, and so that's what they are. This over here was given to me by my wife at the time, Linda, still a great friend. A long time ago, and it's basically it's symbolized as Native American, and it symbolizes freedom, basically. Guy on horseback, and I've had that a long time, since it must be the 1980s. I've had that, and then this one here, that is a Russian doll, and that was given to me, I think, by someone in Croatia. when I was speaking there, and that I kind of put that there symbolically because if you go look at this, if you probably won't be able to do it. I can't. Oh, what's supposed to happen? This is one I made earlier. Oh, one more go. No, what's what? Oh, is there? I don't know my own strength. I haven't got any. Okay, so you take that off, and inside is another doll, and it goes on and on and on and on until there's a doll about that big, and that symbolizes how a few control the many. The different levels of the hierarchy, like I mentioned earlier, the different levels of the hierarchy don't the lower levels of the hierarchy, like the bigger dolls, don't know the smaller dolls at the inner core. They don't know they exist. And so the whole concept of the Russian doll is very, very symbolic of the way the compartmentalized system works to keep people in ignorance. Because the vast majority of people that impose oppression, suppression, manipulation upon others don't know the true reason they're doing it, the true implications of what they're doing, and where it's ultimately coming from. Oh, well, no, we've got this thing we've got this order from on high. I suppose we better do it. Well, what is this on high? Who are those people? Why are they asking you to do this? These are the questions that we need to ask, but most people don't.
I want to ask you some quick fun.
Oh, yeah, here, behind me.
Yeah.
This was from a book called Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. I've got a great friend who I've known right almost basically from the start of this for me in the early 1990s, called Neil Haig, a very, very talented artist. And Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. What I tend to get most of the time, or I certainly did for many years, is I get a picture of the cover in my mind, often when I'm coming out of sleep. And I saw this image of a lion, because the whole theme of the book is human race, get off your knees, rise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. A great poem by a guy called Percy Shelley about people standing up against the few. Ye are many, they are few, and all that stuff. And so I wanted this lion image on the world, like the world was saying, we're not having it anymore. And I saw this picture of a lion's face, and I sent the concept and the picture to Neil, and he produced this fantastic painting of a lion's face on the world. So that's where that is.
Yeah, do you have your latest book near you? Can we see it? Can we see the latest book? Just plug it. Do you have it in your book collection there?
No, because it's in production now, and it's very topical about current events, but it's and puts it in the greater context of what's going on. But it's also about how a renegade mind works, and in the end, it's not even a renegade mind; it's a renegade heart. That's what the real, the depth of it is. But a renegade mind, you see, you can have a critical mind, a critical thinking mind, even, but it's not a renegade mind. I'll give you a quick example. We have a columnist in Britain, on a major newspaper. He's pretty well known, certainly in the industry. He's massively well known. Called Peter Hitchens, and he's been a columnist for a long, long time. And when this started, he was very, very critical. In fact, he was about the only mainstream journalist that was. He was critical of the lockdown. He was critical of all the regulations and what have you. So he was critically thinking about the implications on many levels, not least economic, of what was going on. And then he announced don't know, it's a few weeks ago now. But a long time after, pretty much the best part of a year after he's been critically thinking and criticizing these things, he announced he'd had the COVID vaccine, or alleged vaccine. It's not really a vaccine. And he said, I've had it because there's no way you're going to be able to avoid it and do anything. And this is even before any restrictions to non-vaccinated people were ever implemented. He says, I have people family abroad, and I've had it because I'm going to. I want to go and see them. Now that's a critical thinking mind who could see through different levels of the manipulation and why certain things were unnecessary, but were actually done for control, not health. But a renegade mind would never say, but I'm going to concede to the vaccine, even though I don't want it. And I'm going to concede that, look, there's nothing we can do to stop this madness that's going on. A renegade mind would never do that. It would never concede to tyranny, no matter what the circumstances. Mm-hmm. And so a renegade mind doesn't just see what's going on in terms of tyranny. It refuses to acquiesce to it. It refuses to obey what it knows is designed to enslave. So through this period of over a year, I've never worn a mask. I don't social distance. If people want to get out of my way, well, that's their choice. I am not frightened of them, so I'm not going to get out of their way. And I've gone out whenever I liked. Never mind, you only go out an hour a day, as it was at one point in Britain. Because once we start acquiescing to tyranny, then tyranny rules. As I've said many times, fascism is not brought in by fascists. There's never enough of them. Fascism is imposed by the population acquiescing to fascism. That's how it happens. That's how it happened in Nazi Germany. That's how it happened in a communist expression in Stalinist Russia. Like I said earlier, a very few cannot control a very many unless the very many give their power to the very few. I refuse to do that. And again, it's like if you see the world through the five senses, then it can seem limited. It can seem intimidating. It can seem frightening. And you look at a certain situation and you see it in a certain way. It's a five sense situation. You're looking at it with your five sense mind, and so it seems ever so big and ever so intimidating. And oh my God! But when you come from a point of view that you are a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be, you're on an eternal exploration of forever. And this is just a brief experience called human, one of infinite experiences in all possibility. Then a situation that looks so big to the five sense mind doesn't look big to you, and it doesn't look as intimidating. It doesn't look intimidating at all, because someone says to you, you're going to do this, and if you don't do it, then these are the consequences. And you say, well, the consequences of conceding my freedom to you are much greater than not conceding my freedom to you, no matter what consequences you say that will cause. Because you're looking at it in a different way. You're looking at it as a brief experience, and there'll be another one along in a minute. You're not looking at it as if it's everything. We go back to what I said earlier about, people thinking that one experience is the end of their life. No, it's not. It's just a step on eternal life. And so authority doesn't intimidate me. It doesn't. I just got a uniform on. So what? What do you want me to throw a party or wear black? And if you say to me, authority, you want me to do something, and you explain to me why you want me to do it, and it makes sense, then I'll do it.
Okay, I'm going to try that right now. I'm going to try that right now.
If you lie to me, and I know you're lying because I've done my own research, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Will you answer 5 fun, quick questions about you they got one word, just quick.
One word, oh God.
One
That's
word.
asking the impossible, but I'll give it a go.
What's your favorite color?
Green.
Favorite place to visit? Where's your favorite place to visit?
Well, I live on a beautiful island just off the south coast of England, where I've been in love with the Isle of Wight, since I was a kid when I first came here on holiday. But I guess that's not a visit. That's where I am. Where best place to visit? I love Ireland because I love green landscapes, and Southern Ireland particularly has fantastic green landscapes. So I love Ireland.
Okay, you can say pass on this question. This is more fun than anything. Favorite son?
No, all of them. No, my sons are absolutely fantastic, and it's they built this behind me here. It says iconic. This is a whole media platform. It's like an alternative Netflix across the whole range of alternative information and subjects. You know, documentaries, original documentaries, and series, and films. It's unbelievable. And my sons have created that. So
I'm just playing with you there. Just for fun.
Be proud of them.
Yeah. Next question, real quick. So if you had to pick one interview that you've had that's the most memorable interview, who would it be with?
Well, that has to be with a very famous British personality called Terry Wogan. I went through you could call it a spiritual experience. That was when the top of my head blew off. And it was in all the papers that this guy Icke has gone strange. And so I was invited onto a chat show live. It was the biggest chat show in Britain. And that night, because of all the build-up of what's happened to Icke, it got a massive audience. And the studio audience laughed at me basically from start to finish. And the aftermath was that I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at by virtually everyone. Going into a bar, forget it, was uproar, just ridicule and all that stuff. And the reason that is so memorable is not because of the impact and the consequences for me. It was the interview that set me free. Because if you can come through that historic level of ridicule and still be in your own power, then anything's possible. And it set me free of the fear of what other people thought, because they're all laughing anyway. So that will always be my most memorable interview, I would think.
If you were to invest in a stock right now, based on what you know, in 5-10 years from now, which stock would it be?
Well, I don't invest in stock, but if I was coming from a purely monetary point of view, I would look at what's going on. And what is going on, as I've been writing, was the plan for so long, is to destroy all independent income. So the population become dependent upon the state for survival, and thus, if you're going to get what you need to survive, pittance as it's meant to be, you have to do what we say or else. So I would look at the big cult businesses, which are Amazon and Google, all these major cult businesses. Look at the ones that have done fantastically well during the COVID era, while mom and pop businesses, even medium and big businesses that are not connected to this cult, have gone under in vast numbers. what they want is a world government overseeing a global society of a monoculture. This is why they're targeting cultures, and major corporations that are producing and selling everything. So, you can see where it's going by who's benefited from the last year and a half or so. Look who has financially and in terms of commerce and business, and they're the ones that are meant to prosper, and everything else is meant to disappear. But I would not, at the same time, encourage anyone to put money their way. They've got enough.
And before we wrap up today, is there any questions you have for myself or anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think we've gone along a rather large range of subjects.
Yeah.
There are many more we could talk about, and many more. But I think that will do.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on Perform. You've been an amazing guest.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure.